birthday.
Happy birthday. Nice.
All right.
All right.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. It is so hot. We are at a hawker right now in Singapore,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a special day. It's a bonus episode because it is Shaun's birthday.
Happy birthday to me.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah.
And we thought we would celebrate with some of the things that we love to do. Have little pints.
Yep.
We just wanted to take the time to kind of stop and just evaluate where we're at and just talk about how we're feeling as we continue our journey with Iceberg Mountain.
Yeah. And our last episode was all about reflection. It was about journals. And so we just thought Iceberg Mountain in some ways is kind of like a reflective piece for us because it's a time where we can stop and think about our practices we'd like to undertake and those sort of things. And yeah, like David mentioned now, we really just want to take this moment to think about the journey that lies ahead and where we're at right now.
Well, I mean, I would say these episodes it's therapeutic because it forces us to just pause.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially as teachers, like you have a crazy schedule. We never have time to stop. And if we do stop, we're just on our own. But with another person, we get to actually talk about things and have this dialogue to really flush out what's happening currently and what we could do moving forward.
Yeah. I think too, just as maybe a reflective piece for me, it would be like a small piece of advice for people who do think about these sort of things. One of the things I've really enjoyed about the podcast is I think about 400 ideas a day. And what I like about the way that we've structured our podcast is that it forces me to stop and think about one thing for a longer period. Yeah. And I think there's real power in that. And I think for me, it's helped me to become a bit more focused around things that I think are impactful and things that I've often thought about but not thought through all of the details. And so we're always thinking about with the podcast, what can we pass on to other people that will be useful? I do think that is one thing that people can do is, and myself included, is to stop on one idea, think about what's a really impactful idea you're thinking about, and just dive deep into that idea for a moment and put some other things on hold so that you can flesh it out and see what value it has along the way.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm probably the opposite. I think of one thing and I'm just hyper-focused on that and I can't stop thinking about it. It's an opportunity for me to actually communicate this big idea that I'm obsessed with to a wider audience, which is really cool. And that kind of shows our dynamic. Like, we are very different. At the same time, big ideas-wise, we're pretty similar.
Yeah, we have definitely have similar thoughts on what's impactful in education and that being, really like hands-on practical learning that's connected to some sort of real-world experience that kids can connect to and be engaged with and see a purpose for the skills and knowledge that we're teaching them. I've found impactful as an adult, not so much for the learners I teach, but as an adult teacher is we talked about the idea of like bias towards action and diving in and getting things done. And again, I think with the podcast, that's a good example of that, where we literally started the podcast because one afternoon David said to me, let's go to your house right now and we'll record the podcast. And that's what we did.
Yep. And then we were on a big break and we decided to do the same thing where, we both felt like it wasn't ideal, but we just kind of forced ourselves to do it, which is cool. And I think we're modeling it for our children. I know my children watch me create these episodes and explain my thoughts and share it with the world, like they know that whole process. I think to them it seems very normal, and I'm happy about that. I hope they do that in the future. And another thing is that it gives us an opportunity to share. I think just sharing, communicating thoughts is so human, and to have this opportunity is pretty epic. Even though, if you look at the numbers, not a lot of people are watching currently, not a lot of people are subscribed, but for me that's okay. I have this urge, I have this idea, I want to communicate it, and this outlet is really awesome. Like after we post it and we see the result of what we talked about and what we create, it is really fulfilling. It hits that fix of me wanting to share.
Yeah, and I think maybe building onto that, we talked a couple of weeks ago about Ali Gallup's video of Stop Pouring and Start Drinking. And the idea of like, we collect all this knowledge, but what we really need to do is go and actually use it. And I think for me, I like the fact that we're getting in there and just making things. And we're also improving every time. When I look back at the podcast from the start, I can see that there's a trajectory where things are getting better. And I know for me, with editing and stuff like that, that's also improving. And again, like you said, David, I think as an example for our kids, I hope that they kind of see that this is not something that ends when you finish year 12 and then you go into the workplace, but that idea of self-improvement and making yourself better is something that continues on in adulthood.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see where we'll be at in 5 years, with that consistency.
Yeah.
All right, seeing that this is Shauny K's birthday, I decided to come up with some questions that I could ask him. So here's the first question. Who is your educator celebrity that you want to meet, that you would sit down and have dinner with and have a conversation with?
I've always really respected Noam Chomsky, who he's a bit outside of education, but as an analytical mind and somebody who I feel like I've seen him in interviews reference newspaper articles from 1981, including like the author and the title. I would love to meet him just because I really respect him as someone who is super well spoken and has really thought through what he talks about.
If you were creating a conference, who would be your keynote speaker? This is a person who can present these thoughts in a very compelling storytelling way. Who would that be?
I might steal a hero of yours.
Yeah, no worries.
Casey Neistat is a person who you introduced me to on YouTube, and just that I'd always seen him as a vlogger, but I'd never really watched his videos. He has such a huge following, and he has this appetite for creating stories and sharing his message through easy to absorb stories and messages.
Yeah.
And I would love for him to talk to educators and to students about how you effectively communicate and how you break down your ideas into parts and pieces so that you can get people on board with what you're trying to say.
Right.
I think he would be a really powerful person to have in an education setting.
So you're well known in the office for having pet peeves in education. So what are your top 3 pet peeves?
Yeah, I will say Dave's right. I have opinions for days in the office. I do think I would say my number 1 is just people who are inflexible, because I feel like education is an area where you need to be flexible. We're dealing with students, particularly in elementary school, who are all younger than 13. And so naturally they're going to be crazy. There's just days when you're going to get to school and, someone ate candy for breakfast and is off their head, and you have to be flexible and you have to move around. And for me, when I'm dealing with teachers, I personally really enjoy dealing with teachers who, when I say, I want to do this kind of crazy idea that's going to be super engaging with kids and maybe has a tenuous link to the curriculum, maybe that's going to be too far, but I love the teachers who are like, yeah, I want to try this, like, let's have a go. And then I'm always more than happy to like tie into where they're at with the curriculum, but some people are very, very linear, and I don't personally feel, it's not that it's bad for kids, I just feel like you need to be flexible when you're dealing with kids, because they have good days and bad days, and they're all over the shop, and that's just part of the deal of being a teacher.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I wonder, in our STEM specialist context, a lot of discussion, a lot of instruction, and then barely any time to actually do the coding.
maybe that can come into pet peeve number 2.
Okay.
When we don't give kids an engaging or exciting thing to do. Actually, I can think of a better way to put it. I have a card on my idea wall that says we should be wilding the tame instead of taming the wild. And I think that idea of we often tame the wild. Like, we take things that are so engaging and so amazing. Like, programming is a great one. Or like even Lego robotics. Sometimes Lego robotics is so incredible. You could do crazy things with it. And sometimes we dial it back so far that we give the kids so few options that it's not even interesting anymore. I mean, I think it's interesting for the kids, but it could be so much more. And sometimes we limit that while taming the wild, which is kind of crazy to do. It's an insane thing to do.
All right, so last question is there something that you're going to do this year that you're super excited about? I'm just pumped about.
We're trying to develop our maker program at school,
Yep.
and I am really excited about doing that. And one of the things that I have the opportunity to do sometimes is I work with our learning support team, and the learning support teams, if you're a makerspace person or you're a STEM person, working with the small groups that learning support people work with is such a great opportunity because they're often more flexible with their timetable. The kids are kind of open to doing other things as well. And so I'm working with our learning support team and experimenting with some ideas that I'm not entirely sure will work with a group of 22 kids. But if you're only working with 6 or 7, you can bounce out of that real quick if you need to. So for me, that's one thing that I'm looking forward to doing this year. Is I did it last year as well, but this year I'm really looking forward to working with that learning support team again.
Yeah.
To trial some lessons that are really hands-on. I think will be really impactful, but I just want to test with a smaller group of kids because I don't want to take it into a classroom of 20 plus students and have it fall apart in front of me. If I only have 6 or 7 kids in front of me, I can like deviate to somewhere else real quick and it's not so much of a problem.
Yeah, and also our grade levels, we have like 14 classes in one grade level, so
Yeah.
it's a very big school. You working with the learning support team really encompasses like what you're all about. I think you are someone who the kids really connect with, which is really cool. Even like a couple days in this week, students who were elementary moved on to middle school. They came and said happy birthday, came and just reminisced about what you all did in elementary and just wanted to say hi. And I think that's really cool that you have that connection with students. And it just really shows that you care. For us as teachers, it's going to be just a little small moment in our lives, but it might be for the kids something that they talk about throughout their lives. Like, I remember this teacher. I was so pumped because he gave me the skills to do this and that, you know?
Yeah, I hope so. I think, I sometimes think about that I think what you said just now, that idea that what might not be a really significant moment to us might be something that these students keep as a memory of their school days, sort of for a long period of time moving on.
Yeah.
I do think too, just for our audience, which is really big, it is important to remember as a teacher, particularly one who is trying to push the boundaries of what you're doing, that sometimes it may feel like it doesn't matter and maybe it feels like you're not heard by your administration. But one place of solace I think you can go to sometimes is remembering that for those individual students it does matter.
Yeah.
And that there is a memory component that will travel with them into the future. And you're not going to see that and you're not going to know what that looks like or what impact that is.
Yeah.
But it's important, I think, every now and then just to stop and remember that there is an impact there, even if you're not directly seeing it all the time.
I do want to say you're a great educator. You motivate me and pump me up to be better, which is really awesome. And also our relationship that we have in a personal level, I think has helped us continue this journey of the podcast. So I just want to thank you for all that you've done. I do feel like we talk about education a lot, but also in our personal lives, we are focused on similar things, being dads and being husbands and being the best that we could be.
Yeah, it's a holistic kind of approach.
Yes.
For the Shaun Kirkwood and David Lee Association.
Yes. So if you're in Southeast Asia, please consider going to the Futures of Learning conference because we're going to be presenting about podcasting and how it has benefited us, but also could be a benefit to your classroom.
And it will be just a fun weekend. It's in Kuala Lumpur this year at ISKL. It's a free event, and I think it's going to be really impactful. There's a lot of great speakers there, and it'll be something. If you came along, we would love to meet you and say good day, and we'd have a chat about education. I would just like to reflect back to David the fact that we both respect each other very much, and we enjoy putting this podcast together. Hopefully, you take some things away from it as well, and we hope that during this next week that you continue to be the iceberg
and climb your mountain.